Hello everyone, my name is Gayatri Pandian, course ID 830-628-075044-001 and I'm pursuing my bachelor's in psychology. In my video today, I will be sharing a presentation on ethics and professionalism in pediatric and clinical child psychology for the subject clinical psychology. Like every other profession, pediatric and clinical child psychologists also battle with many challenges in deliberating ethical decisions. In many situations, psychologists need to balance competing concerns and conflicting obligations among overarching ethical principles that appear to collide. Let us look at the difference between ethical and unethical practices within child psychology. First, let us understand what are ethical practices. According to Ray and Fournier, ethical practices of children and families engaged in psychotherapy is the greatest responsibility of any psychotherapies. In many ways, therapy with children and families require the highest standard of ethical behavior, and this is because of the special vulnerabilities of children and the complexity involved with interacting with multiple family members. Now, ethical practices include treating each child and family member with respect, acknowledging and honor individual difference in terms of gender, cultural background, abilities, or family composition. An example of ethical practices within the child psychology would be reporting a child maltreatment. On the other hand, unethical practices can be defined as actions that are against social norms or acts that are considered unacceptable to the public. Let us look at some examples. Having one or more kind of relationship with the patients, which means psychologists should not provide service to someone whom they are personally in contact or personally know. Failure to report is when psychologists are required to report any suspicious act of child abuse, and failure to do so is unethical. Number 3, professional competency. This is when a specific psychologist must be competently skilled to provide treatment to children. Now, these are just some unethical practices. Here, we shall discuss the essential ethical principles that should be upheld when dealing with children in child psychology. Number 1, obtaining parental consent. Now, parents serve as decision-making guides for children, and ethical codes require that informed consent is obtained before any service is provided. Therefore, psychologists must obtain informed consent from the child's parents or guardians. For example, it would be wrong for a psychologist to carry out any assessment procedures before or without obtaining parental consent. Number 2 is respect for children's rights. By the ethical principles of autonomy, beneficence, and justice, children have the right to be treated with respect and given proper care. The principle of autonomy refers to the duty of psychologists to protect and encourage a child's choice. For example, in the case of assessment, psychologists should protect the health and safety of the child by choosing assessments that are deemed necessary and sensitive to their specific needs. And number 3, children's right to confidentiality. Confidentiality here refers to the duty to protect privileged information and to share entrusted information responsibly. However, sharing relevant information with the right people at the right time is vital for good safeguarding practices. For example, let's just say a 7-year-old girl shares that she's been abused by her uncle. This then warrants the psychologist to breach confidentiality. Now, let us look at ways how ethical dilemmas can affect the psychological well-being of the child and the long-term consequences. Let's look at the first point, re-traumatize. The child in therapy may already be traumatized by their current situation. And let's just say the psychologist chooses to break confidentiality and say discuss the therapy session with the parent. For example, telling the parent that the child spoke about maybe a particular parent's anger issues. As a short-term effect, this can affect the child, causing the child to feel persistent sadness and maybe even guilt for talking about a parent to a third person. However, when you look at long-term consequences, this will re-traumatize the child, causing the child to go through an emotional turmoil, and this can also cause directly to the post-traumatic stress disorder. In fact, the child can even have a stigma over therapy. Number two, social embarrassment. Let's take an example of psychological research setting. When the psychologist breaches the confidentiality in a research, it violates the child's rights, and this may cause social embarrassment and shame. For example, a research psychology publishes the name of the child who participated in the research and shared sensitive information. As an effect, the child might encounter shame and start to avoid school and family and friends. Long-term consequences of breach of confidentiality in research, the child may even encounter depression and other mood disorders. And number three is difficulty in concentrating. Working within the limits of the psychologist's competency is the key of preserving the child's safety. For example, if the psychologist is specialized in industrial organization psychology, he or she may not be well versed with pediatric psychology. This will only cause more harm than help to the child. The psychologist may not know how to handle children and may even use the wrong techniques in the therapy. This can cause the child to experience negative cognition, which is attributed to their treatment. This may cause the child to blame themselves for the failure of the treatment, leading the child to feel very confused, frustrated, and experience difficulty in concentrating and focusing. This may cause a long-term consequences on the child where the child will experience self-blaming depression. Now, let's look at how continuous education can contribute to professional development. Now, working with children is challenging in many ways. Ethical education aims to provide psychologists with the necessary information to make decisions at their free will. Let's look at some perspectives of how continuous education and ethics can contribute to the personal development in child psychology. Number one is it helps psychologists ensure client safety and welfare. Continuous education ethics enhances psychologists to uphold a child's safety and welfare. One of the primary responsibilities of psychologists is to safeguard children and to protect children from any risk of harm. For example, if a child explains he or she is been going through eating disorders, thus the psychologist may want to obtain the right channel to help the child to get help. For example, in this case, a nutritionist will be definitely helpful. Second is it helps with ethical decision making in challenging situations. The ethical framework provides guidance outlining various models for ethical decision making. For example, the step-by-step model will help and guide psychologists through situations where maybe a child reveals a traumatic experience. In such cases, the ethical decision-making process ensures the resolution prioritizes the child's welfare despite the dilemma between the child's confidentiality and safety. And number three, ethical guidelines enhances confidentiality and privacy. Continuous education in ethics strengthens knowledge on confidentiality, which is the cornerstone of ethical guidelines in therapy. With the rise of digital technology in pediatric psychology practices, maintaining client privacy has extended into the digital sphere. It is incumbent upon psychologists to utilize technology responsibly, ensuring children's information remain secure and private at all times in this digital age. For example, with the current trend of therapy becoming online through Zoom and Google Meet, psychologists must obtain consent to record the session, or even if they choose to publish or share pictures or videos. Now, let us look at the role of professional bodies in promoting ethical practices. Every professional must belong to a professional body which is responsible for producing the codes of ethics for their respective profession, and they play a role in promoting ethical practices. Let us look at some examples of professional bodies within the clinical psychology. American psychologists have their professional body called American Psychological Association, known as APA. Australian psychologists have their Australian Psychological Society, known as APS, while in Malaysia, psychologists and counsellors have their Persatuan Psychology Malaysia, PRISMA, and Persatuan Counselling Malaysia, PERKAMA. They all respectively are governed by their professional membership and practices. Now, one of the ways professional bodies can help in promoting ethical practices is by providing the means of personal development and support. Now, professionals who work in the fields that bind with their practitioners to confidentiality need an outlet for free discussion of ideas and challenges without the fear of disclosing protected information. So professional bodies involvement provides a venue where members can meet. This acquaintance can often be very valuable resources for advice and direction, since the requirement of anonymity will not be challenged by familiarity with prospective community members. Second is professional bodies educate. Professional bodies offer classes, free access to scholar articles, seminars, and workshops. They also organize conventions, all of which facilitate the meeting of many other psychologists for the purpose of continuous education. Typically, there are early career mentoring programs for the newly licensed psychologists as well, and they provide support and guidance as colleague assistants. And finally, professional bodies furnish affordable advertising opportunities. Now, most professional bodies maintain a website, newsletter, and even publication regarding their activities, industry news, and a broad range of scientific and medical advancement pertaining to the field of psychology. These tools are a vehicle for cost-effective advertisement for psychologists, since many are distributed throughout the higher education system as well as related fields. With that, we have come to the end of my presentation. I would like to conclude by saying ethics within pediatric and clinical child psychologists play a vital role in shaping the mental health of troubled children, not only because it helps the child now with their current challenges, but it also gives them the skills necessary to manage stress and conflict far into the future. Due to the development of psychology over time, ethics has become more and more important than it was in the past. It is also very important to retain reputation of the scientific study of human behavior. Ethical considerations are essential about avoiding any harm to children and young people. The code of ethics should guide psychologists' daily work with young children, and it should be used for making decisions and set policies. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.